Hello, my dear adventurers. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories and deep dives into the world we all love. Tonight, we're exploring something absolutely fascinating. Every monster, every creature, every terrifying entity that could possibly return in Stranger Things Season 5. Now, I've spent countless hours researching this, diving through fan theories, official hints, behind the scenes details, and connecting dots that span all four seasons. And honestly, the sheer scope of what the Duffer Brothers might have planned for this final battle is genuinely staggering. We're talking about an army of horrors, unlike anything Hawkins has ever seen before. So grab your blanket, get comfortable, and let's journey together through the complete catalog of monsters that could emerge when the Upside Down finally wages its last war against our world. Before we dive into each specific creature, it's worth understanding the bigger picture here. Season 4 ended with Hawkins literally splitting open. Four gates merged into one massive rift, tearing through the heart of the town. The Upside Down is no longer trying to infiltrate our world through secret portals or possessed hosts. It's merging with reality itself, spreading like a cancer across Hawkins. And that changes everything. Every creature we've seen before, every monster that's been lurking in that hellish dimension, now has a direct pathway into our world. The barrier between dimensions isn't just weakened anymore, it's actively collapsing. According to what the Duffer Brothers have shared in various interviews, Season 5 is going to feature the largest scale battle the series has ever seen. They've described it as the ultimate confrontation, where all the monsters from across the show's history could potentially return for one final assault. Nancy's vision in Season 4 showed us glimpses of this future, describing dead soldiers and armies of creatures led by something massive with a gaping mouth. That vision hasn't come true yet, which means Season 5 is going to be about making that nightmare a reality. Let's start with the creature that began it all, the one that dragged Will Byers into the Upside Down and kickstarted this entire saga, the Demogorgon. This iconic monster has been called many things throughout the series, but its official designation as the Demogorgon comes from the Boys Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and honestly, it's a fitting name for something so utterly terrifying. The Demogorgon stands roughly 7 to 8 feet tall when fully grown, a bipedal predator with grayish, leathery skin that looks almost wet under the right lighting. Its most distinctive feature is that horrifying flower-like head that opens into 5 petal-shaped sections, revealing rows upon rows of razor-sharp teeth arranged in concentric circles. When it roars, that face splits open wide enough to swallow a human head whole. The sound it makes is this bone-chilling combination of a roar and a screech, something between a wounded animal and a creature that should never have existed in nature. And what makes the Demogorgon particularly dangerous is its hunting methodology. This isn't some mindless beast that just attacks anything it sees. The Demogorgon is a strategic predator. It tracks prey using blood like a shark, able to detect even small amounts from considerable distances. Remember how it found Will in Season 1, following the trail after he cut his hand? That's not random monster behavior, that's specialized hunting adaptation. The creature can also sense dimensional weaknesses, navigating between the Upside Down and our world through temporary gates or thin spots in reality. When it moves, it's fast, faster than you'd expect for something that size. Bob Newby learned that the hard way in Season 2 when he tried to outrun the Demodogs. The Demogorgon can climb walls, hang from ceilings, and navigate complex environments with disturbing ease. Its ambush predator, stalker, and brute force attacker all rolled into one nightmare package. In Season 1, Eleven managed to disintegrate the Hawkins Demogorgon during their confrontation at Hawkins Middle School. It looked like the creature was obliterated, torn apart by her powers. But as we learned in later seasons, there are multiple Demogorgons in the Upside Down. The species is native to Dimension X, the primordial realm that existed before Vecna reshaped parts of it into the Upside Down we know. Season 4 proved this conclusively when we saw the Russian Demogorgon in the Kamchatka prison camp. The Soviet Union had somehow captured a living specimen, keeping it in a cage beneath their gulag, where they used it to execute prisoners in the most brutal way imaginable. Hopper, Joyce, and Murray faced that Demogorgon in one of Season 4's most tense sequences, ultimately killing it by beheading it with a sword while it was weakened by fire. But here's the thing about that encounter. It confirmed that Demogorgons can be killed by conventional means if you hit them hard enough or use their weaknesses against them. They're vulnerable to extreme heat, which is why fire causes them to recoil and retreat. But more importantly, that Russian Demogorgon proved these creatures can survive independently, even when separated from the main hive mind connection to Vecna and the Mind Flayer. Now, for Season 5, the evidence that Demogorgons will return is overwhelming. Recent footage from marketing materials and leaked scenes has shown a Demogorgon attacking the Wheeler family home. There's this absolutely chilling sequence where Karen and Holly Wheeler are hiding in a bathtub, submerged underwater, while a Demogorgon smashes through the bathroom door. The creature is hunting them room by room, systematically searching the house. What makes this scene particularly significant is that it's set to ABBA's Fernando playing in the background, creating this surreal juxtaposition between the cheerful music and the absolute horror unfolding on screen. This scene alone tells us that Demogorgons are going to be a major threat in Season 5, actively hunting main characters in their own homes. The sanctuary of Hawkins' suburban neighborhoods has been breached. But there's more to this than just monster attacks. The official 5-minute season opener that Netflix released showed something that changes our entire understanding of Will's original abduction. We see Will back in November 1983 in the Upside Down, and he's not just being chased by a Demogorgon. He's confronted by Vecna himself. And here's the crucial detail. The Demogorgon bows to Vecna, clearly demonstrating that it's under his command. Vecna actually says to Will during this encounter, "You are going to help me one last time." This reframes Will's entire Season 1 kidnapping. It wasn't a random monster attack. The Demogorgon was specifically sent to capture Will on Vecna's orders. Will was always meant to be taken, always meant to be the bridge between dimensions, always meant to serve Vecna's larger plan. This means the Demogorgons in Season 5 won't be acting as independent hunters. They'll be Vecna's soldiers, deployed strategically as part of his army. Expect to see multiple Demogorgons working in coordinated attacks, possibly in packs, hunting specific targets that Vecna wants eliminated or captured. The life cycle of a Demogorgon is also worth understanding, because it might give us clues about what we'll see in Season 5. These creatures go through 6 distinct developmental stages, similar to certain amphibians on Earth. It starts as a slug-like larva that's implanted into a host. We saw this happen to Will in Season 1, though thankfully 11 and the others were able to extract it before it fully developed. The larva then grows into what Dustin called a polywog, which is that tadpole-like creature he found in Season 2 and named D'Artagnan, or Dart for short. At this stage, they're actually kinda cute in a weird way, which is why Dustin wanted to keep Dart as a pet before realizing what it actually was. From polywog, they develop through several intermediate stages that the production team internally nicknamed Frogagorgon and Catagorgon before reaching the Demodog phase, which we'll talk about in detail shortly. Finally, they mature into full adult Demogorgons. This complete life cycle means we could see Demogorgons at various developmental stages in Season 5. If Vecna has been breeding them deliberately, we might encounter nests of eggs, swarms of larvae, packs of Demodogs, and fully grown adult Demogorgons, all as part of the same coordinated assault. From a design perspective, the Demogorgon remains one of the most successful creature creations in modern television. The Duffer Brothers have acknowledged that they were heavily inspired by the xenomorph from the Alien franchise, particularly that disturbing biomechanical aesthetic where the creature looks simultaneously organic and somehow wrong. The practical effects team used actual prosthetics and physical creature suits for many of the Demogorgon scenes, which is why it looks so tangible and real on screen. There's weight to it when it moves, actual physicality that CGI sometimes struggles to replicate. The sound design is equally brilliant, mixing animal roars with metallic screeches and wet, organic sounds that make your skin crawl. When a Demogorgon is nearby, you feel it in your gut before you even see it on screen. For the final season, I'd expect the Duffer Brothers to show us new aspects of Demogorgon behavior we haven't seen before. Perhaps we'll learn more about their intelligence level, whether they're purely animalistic or possesses some rudimentary cunning. The fact that they bow to Vecna suggests they understand hierarchy and can follow complex commands. We might see them using tactics, setting traps, or working together in ways that demonstrate strategic thinking. Nancy's experience in the Upside Down during Season 4 showed us that these creatures have a home territory they defend, with Vecna's lair surrounded by swarms of them. Imagine if Vecna deploys them as an occupying force in Hawkins, with Demogorgons patrolling the streets, hunting for survivors, establishing nests in key locations. The town would become a war zone, with safe houses and resistance cells fighting against a seemingly endless army of predators. And if even one Demogorgon is incredibly difficult to kill, as we saw throughout the series, then facing dozens or potentially hundreds of them would be absolutely catastrophic. Now let's talk about the Demodogs, because these creatures are going to be absolutely crucial to understanding the monster army in Season 5. Demodogs are essentially juvenile Demogorgons, caught in that 5th developmental stage before they reach full maturity. They're smaller than adult Demogorgons, standing roughly the size of a large dog, maybe 3 to 4 feet tall at the shoulder. But what they lack in size, they more than make up for in speed, ferocity, and pack hunting behavior. While an adult Demogorgon is an apex predator that hunts alone, Demodogs are pack animals. They swarm their prey, attacking from multiple angles, overwhelming through sheer numbers rather than individual strength. And that makes them, in some ways, even more terrifying than their adult forms. The most memorable appearance of Demodogs was in Season 2, when they emerged from the Upside Down in coordinated swarms. We saw dozens of them, maybe even hundreds, traveling through the tunnel system beneath Hawkins. When they attacked, they moved like a tide, a living wave of teeth and claws that nothing could stand against. Bob Newby's death remains one of the most heartbreaking moments in the entire series, and it happened because a pack of Demodogs cornered him just as he thought he'd made it to safety. They tore him apart in seconds, demonstrating exactly how lethal these creatures are when hunting in groups. Similarly, when they attacked Hawkins' lab, they massacred trained soldiers who were armed and prepared for combat. The Demodogs moved through the facility like water, finding every crack and gap, overwhelming defensive positions through pure numbers and relentless aggression. What makes Demodogs particularly interesting is their connection to the hive mind. In Season 2, when 11 closed the gate, all the Demodogs immediately dropped dead. They weren't just controlled by the Mind Flayer through some psychic connection. They were completely dependent on that connection for life itself. Cutting them off from the hive mind didn't just make them lose coordination, it literally killed them instantly. This suggests that Demodogs, more than adult Demogorgons, are purely extensions of the Mind Flayer's will. They have no independent existence, no survival instinct beyond what the hive mind provides. They're drones in the truest sense, biological weapons deployed by a central intelligence. But here's where things get interesting for Season 5. The gates are wide open now. Vecna is still connected to the hive mind, and unlike in Season 2, there's no single gate that 11 can close to shut everything down. The Upside Down has merged with Hawkins through that massive rift, creating a permanent bridge between dimensions, which means Demodogs can now pour through in essentially unlimited numbers. They don't need to wait for temporary gates to open or navigate through narrow portals. They can just run straight across the boundary between worlds. Imagine Hawkins' streets swarming with hundreds of Demodogs, hunting in coordinated packs, attacking any human they encounter. It would be like something out of a zombie apocalypse movie, except these aren't slow shambling corpses. They're fast, smart pack hunters with razor-sharp teeth and claws. The recent Season 5 trailer showed Max Mayfield, still recovering and in hospital scrubs, being chased by what appears to be a pack of Demodogs. This is significant for several reasons. First, it confirms that Demodogs are definitely returning for the final season. Second, it shows that they're targeting specific individuals, which suggests Vecna is using them for strategic purposes rather than just random attacks. Max is vulnerable, both physically after her injuries and psychologically after her near-death experience with Vecna. She's exactly the kind of target Vecna would want eliminated or recaptured. The fact that he's sending Demodogs after her specifically means he sees her as enough of a threat or asset that he's deploying resources to deal with her personally. From a tactical perspective, Demodogs would be Vecna's shock troops. They're expendable, numerous, and devastating in combat. You'd use them to overrun defensive positions, to hunt down fleeing civilians, to force your enemies into making desperate moves. Adult demogorgons are valuable assets that you'd want to preserve and deploy strategically. But demodogs? You can throw them at a problem in waves, sacrificing dozens or hundreds if it means achieving your objective. It's brutal, efficient, and utterly terrifying from the perspective of the humans trying to survive. There's also the question of whether we'll see the earlier developmental stages of demodogs in Season 5. Dustin's relationship with Dart in Season 2 showed us that at the Pollywog stage, these creatures can seem almost harmless, even cute. Dart recognized Dustin, showed what might have been affection or at least familiarity, and when forced to choose between following the hive mind's commands and letting Dustin pass, he hesitated. That moment of connection, brief as it was, demonstrated that maybe not every creature from the Upside Down is purely evil. Maybe there's some capacity for individual identity beneath the hive mind's control. For Season 5, imagine if Dustin encounters another demodog and tries to replicate his success with Dart. Maybe there are creatures that can be reached, reasoned with, or at least distracted long enough to save lives. It would be a small hope in the midst of the apocalypse, but those small hopes are what Stranger Things has always been about. The sound design for demodogs is notably different from adult demogorgons. They have this higher-pitched, chittering quality to their calls, almost like a combination of a hyena's laugh and something more mechanical. When a pack of them is hunting, you hear this chorus of clicks and screeches that builds in intensity as they close in on prey. It's the sound of coordination, of multiple predators communicating and working together. In Season 5, I'd expect to hear that sound echoing through Hawkins' streets, a constant reminder that nowhere is safe anymore. Now we move to perhaps the most personally devastating creatures in the entire series, the Demobats. These flying horrors were introduced in Season 4, and they're responsible for one of the show's most heartbreaking deaths. Eddie Munson, who had spent the entire season running and hiding, finally stood his ground to protect his friends. He drew the Demobats away from Dustin, becoming the target of their swarm, and they overwhelmed him, biting and clawing until he collapsed. Eddie died a hero, but the manner of his death, torn apart by dozens of these creatures in the Upside Down's toxic atmosphere, was genuinely horrific to witness. The Demobats proved themselves to be lethal killers, and Season 5 is absolutely going to feature them prominently. Demobats are essentially the flying variant of the Demogorgon species, adapted for aerial predation. They're roughly the size of large birds, maybe comparable to ravens or crows, with leathery wings that span several feet. Their bodies are elongated and muscular, built for sustained flight and aerial maneuverability. Like their ground-based relatives, Demobats have that distinctive petal mouth structure, though scaled down proportionally to their smaller bodies. When they attack, they latch onto victims with their claws and then use their teeth to tear into flesh, injecting some kind of toxin or venom that causes extreme pain and rapid blood loss. Multiple Demobat bites proved fatal to Eddie within minutes, suggesting their venom is quite potent, or that blood loss from multiple simultaneous wounds is simply too much for a human body to handle. What makes Demobats particularly dangerous is their swarm behavior. While a single Demobat might be manageable to fight off, they never attack alone. They hunt in flocks of dozens, sometimes hundreds, creating a living cloud of claws and teeth that's almost impossible to defend against. Steve Harrington discovered this during season 4 when Demobats dragged him into Lover's Lake and started trying to drown and devour him simultaneously. Only Nancy, Robin, and Eddie's quick intervention saved him, and even then he came away badly injured with significant bite wounds around his neck and torso. The Demobats had been trying to strangle him while eating him alive, showing a level of cruelty that goes beyond simple predation. Like Demodogs, Demobats are part of Vecna's hive mind. They respond to his commands and can be deployed strategically. In Season 4, we saw them guarding the gate to Vecna's lair in the Upside Down, forming a barrier that had to be breached before the group could reach him. Vecna can apparently see through their eyes, or at least coordinate their movements with precision, making them excellent scouts and surveillance units in addition to being weapons. An army of flying creatures that report back to a central intelligence is a military asset of incredible value. Vecna would know every movement his enemies make, every defensive position they establish, every attempt to organize resistance. The Demobats would be his eyes in the sky. For Season 5, there's strong evidence that Demobats will be featured even more prominently than in Season 4. One of the episode titles for Season 5 is Escape from Camazotz, and this has led to intense fan speculation. In Dungeons & Dragons lore, Camazotz is the Ulman god of bats, associated with the underworld, disease, and plague. The name also appears in A Wrinkle in Time, where Camazotz is a dark planet consumed by an evil entity. Either interpretation suggests that Episode 6 of Season 5 will feature Demobats in a major way, possibly as the primary threat of that episode. Some fans have theorized that Camazotz might be the name of a new, larger bat creature, possibly a queen or alpha that controls the Demobat swarms. Others think it refers to a location, perhaps a realm within the Upside Down that's entirely populated by bat-like creatures. There's also the Eddie Munson resurrection theory that won't seem to die, and it directly involves Demobats. In Dungeons & Dragons lore, there's a character named Cass the Betrayer who was Vecna's vampire lieutenant, before eventually turning against him. Since Eddie died from Demobat bites in the Upside Down, some fans theorize he could return as a vampire-like creature, either still himself or transformed into something between human and monster. This would give Joseph Quinn a chance to return to the show in a form that honors Eddie's sacrifice, while also creating a tragic confrontation where the characters have to face their friend who's been twisted into one of Vecna's servants. I'm honestly skeptical of this theory because it feels like it would undermine the impact of Eddie's death, but the popularity of the idea demonstrates how much fans loved his character and want to see him again in any capacity. From a practical standpoint, fighting Demobats requires completely different tactics than fighting ground-based creatures. You can't barricade against flying enemies. They can come from any direction, drop from above, or swoop in from unexpected angles. Fire seems to work as a deterrent, as Steve discovered when he used his lighter to ward off a Demobat that was trying to get through a vent. But fire isn't practical for dealing with large swarms in open spaces. The characters are going to need to get creative, possibly using noise to confuse or disorient the bats, finding enclosed spaces where the Demobats' flight advantage is neutralized, or discovering some new weakness we haven't seen yet. The visual of Demobat swarms is going to be spectacular and terrifying in Season 5. Imagine the sky over Hawkins filled with massive flocks of these creatures, blotting out the sun, creating this living, writhing ceiling of predators. Anyone caught outside would be in immediate mortal danger. The entire town would need to move underground or find ways to fortify buildings against aerial assault. And at night, with Demobots patrolling the darkness, the sound of their wings and screeches would create this constant ambient nightmare that never lets you forget what's waiting outside. Now let's discuss one of the most disturbing creatures ever created for the series, the Flesh Flayer, also known as the Spider Monster. This grotesque abomination appeared in Season 3 and remains one of the most viscerally horrifying things the Duffer Brothers have put on screen. The Flesh Flayer was the Mind Flayer's attempt to create a physical body for itself in our dimension, an avatar made from melted human flesh and bone. To construct it, the Mind Flayer possessed dozens of Hawkins residents, turning them into flayed who mindlessly consumed toxic chemicals that caused their bodies to liquefy. Then all of those liquefied bodies were drawn together, merging into one massive biomass that the Mind Flayer could control and use as a physical form. The resulting creature was absolutely massive, standing at least 3 to 4 stories tall when fully formed. It had a spider-like body structure with multiple elongated limbs, which is why the kids called it the Spider Monster, though its design also incorporated the Mind Flayer's iconic silhouette from Season 2. The entire thing was made of flesh, muscle, bone, and various other biological materials, all fused together in this wet, glistening mass that constantly dripped fluids. It could form tentacles or appendages at will, reshaping parts of itself as needed. When it attacked, it moved with terrifying speed for something that size, able to smash through walls, grab victims with its tentacles, and even partially separate pieces of itself to attack from multiple directions. What made the Flesh Flayer particularly disturbing wasn't just its appearance or power, but the knowledge of what it was made from. Every part of that creature was someone who'd been possessed, liquefied, and absorbed. Heather, Billy, and dozens of other Hawkins residents became literal building blocks for this monster. Their personalities were gone, their bodies reduced to raw material. It was body horror at its most extreme, taking human beings and transforming them into an anonymous mass of flesh serving an alien intelligence. The final battle with the Flesh Flayer in Season 3 was epic in scope. The creature pursued 11 and the others through Starcourt Mall, smashing through floors and walls, reaching in with tentacles trying to grab them. When it finally cornered 11, it was attempting to implant a piece of the Mind Flayer inside her, likely to possess her or use her powers for its own ends. Only Joyce closing the gate to the Upside Down saved them, severing the Mind Flayer's connection and causing the Flesh Flayer to collapse into an inert pile of biological matter. For Season 5, the question is whether the Flesh Flayer will return in some form. The circumstances that allowed its creation in Season 3 were fairly specific. The Mind Flayer needed a piece of itself already present in our dimension, enough possessed hosts to provide the biomass, and time to assemble them without interference. With the gate wide open in Season 5, and Vecna coordinating the invasion, those conditions could absolutely be replicated. In fact, it might be even easier now because the Mind Flayer has direct access to both dimensions simultaneously. There's also Nancy's vision to consider. When Vecna showed her the future in Season 4, she described seeing dead soldiers and massive creatures attacking Hawkins. While many fans think she was referring to a new monster like the Thessal Hydra, it's entirely possible she was actually seeing another Flesh Flayer or something similar. The Mind Flayer could create multiple avatars, each made from different materials or designed for different purposes. Perhaps we'll see variations on the spider monster concept, creatures assembled from different combinations of biological and non-biological materials, each with unique capabilities and weaknesses. The metaphorical weight of the Flesh Flayer is significant too. It represents the complete loss of individual identity, the erasure of what makes humans unique, all in service of a hive mind that sees people as nothing more than resources to be consumed and repurposed. In Season 5, with Hawkins under siege and the Upside Down merging with reality, we could see the Flesh Flayer concept taken to its logical extreme. What if the Mind Flayer tries to absorb the entire population of Hawkins? What if its ultimate goal is to transform all of humanity into one massive interconnected biomass under its control? That would be existential horror on a scale the show hasn't touched yet. From a production standpoint, the Flesh Flayer was a triumph of visual effects. The way it moved, the texture of its flesh, the sounds it made, all contributed to making it feel real and threatening despite being entirely CGI. The Duffer Brothers have shown they're willing to invest in large-scale creature effects for their finales, so if the Flesh Flayer or something like it returns for Season 5, we can expect it to be even more impressive and terrifying than before. Speaking of the hive mind's infrastructure, we need to talk about the vines and tentacles that permeate the Upside Down. These biological structures might not seem as immediately threatening as the mobile creatures we've discussed, but they're actually fundamental to how the Upside Down operates and spreads. The vines are like the nervous system, or perhaps the root structure of the entire dimension, connecting everything together, transmitting information, and spreading the Upside Down's influence into new areas. Understanding the vines is crucial to understanding how Vecna's invasion actually works. The vines first appeared prominently in Season 2, growing throughout the tunnel system beneath Hawkins. Hopper and Bob encountered them during their exploration of the tunnels, discovering that the vines reacted to stimuli, recoiling from fire and seeming to communicate distress to the rest of the network when injured. Will Byers, still connected to the Mind Flayer, could feel when the vines were burned, experiencing their pain as if it were his own. This demonstrated that the vines are all part of one interconnected organism, sharing sensory information across the entire network. In Season 4, we saw the vines in much greater detail when characters entered the Upside Down itself. They cover virtually every surface, growing over buildings, streets, furniture, everything. They pulse with some kind of internal rhythm, almost like breathing or a heartbeat, suggesting they're alive in a fundamental way. When Nancy got trapped by the vines near Vecna's lair, they wrapped around her limbs and started pulling her toward him, demonstrating that they can move with purpose and considerable strength. The vines can apparently extend and retract at will, reaching out to grab intruders or pulling back when threatened. What makes the vines particularly insidious is how they spread. We've seen that wherever the Upside Down bleeds into our dimension, the vines follow. They start growing through the cracks between worlds, sending tendrils into our reality, transforming the environment to match the Upside Down. In Season 4's finale, we saw vines beginning to spread through Hawkins, growing out from the massive rift that split the town. Within days, they had spread to multiple locations, growing over houses and infrastructure, killing vegetation, and presumably continuing to expand outward. If left unchecked, the vines would eventually cover everything, transforming all of Hawkins and eventually beyond into an extension of the Upside Down. For Season 5, the vines are going to be everywhere. They're not just environmental hazards or decorative elements anymore. They're an active threat. Characters will need to navigate through areas choked with vines, avoiding getting grabbed or trapped. The vines might be used by Vecna to monitor movement, to set traps, or to create barriers that block certain routes and force people into kill zones. There's also the question of whether damage to the vines damages the Upside Down itself or Vecna personally. If the vines are truly the nervous system of the dimension, then destroying large sections of them might cause systemic damage to the hive mind. This could give the humans a viable strategy. Rather than just fighting individual monsters, target the infrastructure that connects them all. There's also something deeply unsettling about the way the vines move and react. They have this organic, almost sexual quality to their movement, writhing and pulsing in ways that trigger visceral discomfort in viewers. When Nancy was trapped, the vines didn't just hold her, they seemed to caress her, to explore her in a way that felt predatory and violating. It's body horror again, the threat of being touched and consumed by something fundamentally alien and wrong. In Season 5, I'd expect the vines to be used for truly horrific scenes, possibly showing them consuming victims, pulling them into the biomass of the Upside Down, integrating them into the hive mind against their will. The vines might also have variations we haven't seen yet, thicker, stronger versions that can smash through walls or lift vehicles, thinner, faster ones that can slip through cracks and strangle victims, maybe even flowering or fruiting bodies that release spores or produce other creatures. The Upside Down is essentially one massive organism, and the vines are its primary means of growth and reproduction. As it spreads through Hawkins in Season 5, we'll likely see the vines becoming more aggressive, more varied, and more central to the action. Now we need to discuss what might be the most important monster in the entire series, the Mind Flayer itself. This entity has been present since Season 2, serving as the overarching intelligence behind most of the threats the characters have faced. But despite 4 seasons of appearances, we still don't fully understand what the Mind Flayer truly is or what it wants. And Season 5 needs to provide those answers while also showing us the Mind Flayer's final form and ultimate plan. In Season 2, the Mind Flayer was introduced as this massive shadow entity in the Upside Down, a gigantic spider-shaped being made of darkness and smoke that loomed over the dimension like a storm. Will Byers, still connected to the Upside Down after his Season 1 ordeal, saw it in his visions and immediately recognized it as something terrifying. Dustin named it the Mind Flayer after the Dungeons and Dragons creature that enslaves people's minds, and that name stuck because it perfectly captured what the entity did. It possessed Will, using him as a spy to gather intelligence about Hawkins and the people trying to close the gate. When the characters tried to force the Mind Flayer out of Will using heat, it fought back viciously, demonstrating a powerful will and intelligence. Season 3 showed the Mind Flayer creating a physical avatar in our world through the Flesh Flayer, as we discussed earlier. It displayed tactical thinking, manipulating Billy Hargrove, and creating an army of Flayed to build its body while avoiding detection. The Mind Flayer seemed to have specific goals: maintain a connection to our dimension, eliminate threats like Eleven, who could close gates, and establish a permanent presence that would allow it to continue its invasion. Then Season 4 completely recontextualized everything we thought we knew about the Mind Flayer. Vecna revealed that when he was banished to the Upside Down in 1979, he encountered particles of swirling darkness and chaos. He claimed that he took those particles and gave them form, shaping them into the distinctive spider silhouette that we recognize as the Mind Flayer. According to Vecna's version of events, the Mind Flayer is his creation, his weapon, an extension of his will and power. He's the puppet master, and the Mind Flayer is his puppet. But here's where things get interesting, and where fan theories go absolutely wild. A lot of viewers, myself included, aren't entirely convinced that Vecna is telling the whole truth. There are too many inconsistencies, too many questions that his explanation doesn't fully address. For instance, young Henry Creel in the 1950s became fascinated with spiders, particularly a black widow he found in his house. He talked about how spiders were misunderstood, how they brought order through their killing. That obsession with spiders predates his arrival in the Upside Down by decades. So why was he already drawn to that spider imagery? Unless something was influencing him even back then, planting ideas in his mind, grooming him for a specific purpose. There's also the question of power levels. The Mind Flayer, as seen in Seasons 2 and 3, felt almost cosmically powerful. A force of nature that could possess multiple people simultaneously, coordinate complex strategies, and create massive physical manifestations. Vecna is powerful, incredibly so, but he still seems human in some fundamental way. He can be injured, tricked, fought. The Mind Flayer felt like something beyond human categories entirely, an alien intelligence that operated on a completely different level. If Vecna created it, how is it so powerful? How does it have capabilities that seem to exceed even his demonstrated abilities? The stage play Stranger Things, The First Shadow, which serves as an official prequel to the series, reportedly provides some additional context that complicates the Vecna created the Mind Flayer narrative even further. According to reports from people who've seen the play, it suggests the Mind Flayer is an ancient entity from Dimension X, something that existed long before Henry Creel was even born. This would mean Vecna didn't create the Mind Flayer, he discovered it, possibly merged with it, and now serves it while believing he's in control. The Mind Flayer would be using Vecna's power, memories, and form to achieve its own goals, manipulating him into thinking he's the mastermind, when really he's just another puppet. For Season 5, The true nature of the Mind Flayer is going to be absolutely critical to how the story resolves. If Vecna created it, then defeating Vecna should theoretically destroy or disable the Mind Flayer. But if the Mind Flayer is the true power and Vecna is just its most powerful servant, then killing Vecna won't be enough. The Mind Flayer would simply find another host, another vessel, another way to continue its invasion. This would be a genuinely terrifying twist because it would mean the heroes haven't actually been fighting the real enemy all along. There's also the question of what the Mind Flayer actually looks like in its true form. We've seen its shadow form in Season 2 and its flesh avatar in Season 3, but have we ever seen the Mind Flayer itself? Is it a physical being at all, or is it more like a consciousness, a psychic presence that inhabits and controls other things? In Dimension X, before Vecna arrived, what form did the Mind Flayer take? These are fundamental questions that Season 5 needs to answer. From a narrative perspective, having the Mind Flayer be the ultimate villain would be incredibly satisfying. It's been there since Season 2. It's responsible for most of the trauma and death our characters have suffered, and it represents something truly alien and incomprehensible. Vecna is terrifying, but he's still recognizably human, motivated by understandable if twisted emotions. The Mind Flayer is other with a capital O, something fundamentally inhuman that can't be reasoned with or redeemed. That makes for a more existential form of horror. I'd expect Season 5 to feature the Mind Flayer manifesting more directly than ever before. Perhaps we'll see its true form, whatever that might be. Perhaps it will create multiple avatars simultaneously, coordinating attacks across different locations. Perhaps it will attempt to possess someone from the main cast, creating an internal threat that's even more dangerous than the external army of monsters. Whatever form its appearance takes, the Mind Flayer needs to feel like the culmination of everything that's been building since Will Byers first felt the back of his neck tingling in Season 2. Now let's talk about Vecna himself, because while he's definitely the primary humanoid antagonist, he's also fundamentally a monster. His transformation from Henry Creel into the lich-like creature we saw in Season 4 was one of the most disturbing body horror sequences in the series. When Eleven banished him to the Upside Down in 1979, he was burned, broken, physically destroyed. But somehow he survived and changed, his body mutating into something between human and the creatures of the Upside Down. His skin became gray and dead-looking, stretched tight over bones, parts of it seeming to fuse with the vines and organic matter of the dimension itself. His eyes are milky and dead, his movements jerky and unnatural. He looks like a corpse that's been reanimated, which is essentially what he is. Vecna's powers make him one of the most dangerous entities in the entire show. He can invade people's minds from anywhere, pulling them into psychic spaces where he tortures them with their worst memories and traumas. He feeds on guilt, shame, and pain, using those emotions to break down his victims' psychological defenses before killing them. When he kills someone under his curse, their bodies levitate, their limbs break, their eyes cave in, and a gate opens at the location of their death. It's ritualistic killing with a specific magical purpose, using death to reshape reality itself. In Season 4, Vecna almost succeeded in his plan. He killed 3 victims and nearly claimed Max as his 4th, which would have opened 4 gates that would merge into one massive rift. The only reason Max survived is because 11 used her powers to literally restart Max's heart and keep her consciousness anchored to life somehow, even though Max's body is now in a coma. But Vecna still got what he needed. That rift opened, Hawkins started merging with the Upside Down, and Vecna survived despite being set on fire, shot multiple times, and thrown out a window. He's still out there, wounded but alive, planning his next move. For Season 5, Vecna is going to be more powerful and more monstrous than ever. The trailers have shown glimpses of him in his lair, the distorted upside-down version of the town hall, where he's apparently coordinating his forces and plotting Hawkins' destruction. There are rumors that we'll see him in different forms, possibly showing more of his transformation process or revealing new abilities he's developed. Some fans speculate he'll merge even more completely with the Upside Down, becoming less human and more like a living extension of the dimension itself. There's also the question of Vecna's ultimate goal. He claims he wants to reshape the world, to bring order to chaos by destroying humanity and merging all dimensions into one. But is that really what he wants? Or is he just repeating what the Mind Flayer told him to want? Henry Creel was a deeply damaged human being, traumatized by his powers and his inability to connect with other people. The Mind Flayer took that damaged person and turned him into a weapon. Vecna might genuinely believe he's working towards some higher purpose, but he could just be the Mind Flayer's tool, used and discarded when his purpose is served. The connection between Vecna and certain characters, particularly Will and 11, is going to be crucial in Season 5. Vecna specifically targeted Will back in Season 1, keeping him alive when he could have easily killed him. He's maintained some kind of connection to Will ever since, using him as a bridge between dimensions. The leaked Season 5 footage showing Vecna telling Will, "You're going to help me one last time," confirms that this connection is central to the final season's plot. Whatever Vecna's endgame is, Will is somehow essential to it. Similarly, Vecna and 11 are linked through their shared origin at Hawkins' lab. 11 is the one who banished Vecna to the Upside Down, and Vecna has been obsessed with her ever since. Their confrontation in Season 4 was brutal, with Vecna very nearly killing 11 before she rallied and fought back. But that wasn't their final battle, it was just the opening round. Season 5 needs to give us the definitive Vecna versus 11 showdown, and it needs to be epic in scope and emotional in weight. There's also the possibility that Vecna will get reinforcements we haven't seen yet. What if there are others like him? Other subjects from Hawkins' lab experiments, other individuals who were cast into the Upside Down and transformed. We know that Vecna killed most of the numbered children in the Rainbow Room massacre, but 11 survived, and Kaylee, 8, escaped. Could there be others out there, either helping Vecna or potentially joining the fight against him? The expanded universe of Stranger Things has hinted at other facilities, other experiments, other victims of MKUltra programs. Season 5 could bring some of those elements into play. From a monster design perspective, Vecna is brilliant because he's recognizably human enough to be deeply unsettling. He's not some alien creature we can emotionally distance ourselves from. He was a person once, a child even, and we've seen his origin story. That makes him more tragic and somehow more horrible than if he was just pure evil from the start. Jamie Campbell Bower's performance brings genuine depth to the character, making Vecna feel like a complex villain rather than just a monster to be defeated. The hours he spent in the makeup chair show in every scene, the practical prosthetics giving him a physical presence that pure CGI could never match. For Season 5, Vecna's monster form needs to evolve one last time. Perhaps we'll see him at his absolute peak of power, fully merged with the Upside Down, transformed into something that barely resembles human anymore. Or perhaps we'll see him weakened, vulnerable, revealing the broken man beneath the monster exterior. Either way, his final confrontation needs to be the emotional and visual climax of the entire series. Now we come to what might be the most hotly debated potential monster in Season 5, the Thessal Hydra. This creature has been theorized about since Season 1, and all evidence points to it finally appearing in the final season. The Thessal Hydra comes from Dungeons & Dragons lore, where it's described as a massive reptilian creature with 8 Hydra-like heads arranged around a central mouth filled with sharp teeth. It's a civilization destroyer in the game, typically used as a final boss encounter for high-level campaigns. And its connection to Stranger Things goes all the way back to the very first season. In the finale of Season 1, after Will is rescued from the Upside Down, the boys gather to play Dungeons & Dragons again. Mike, as Dungeon Master, introduces the Thessal Hydra as their final challenge. This time, Will successfully uses a fireball to defeat it, and the campaign ends with victory. At the time, it seemed like a nice bookend to the season, showing Will reclaiming the life that was stolen from him. But in retrospect, that D&D game has always foreshadowed the real-life events the characters would face. In the Season 1 opener, Will failed his role against the Demogorgon and was immediately taken by one in real life. The pattern holds that if they defeated the Thessal Hydra in the game at the end of Season 1, they'll need to defeat a real one in Season 5. The strongest evidence for the Thessal Hydra's appearance comes from Nancy's vision in Season 4. When Vecna showed her his plans, she described seeing a giant creature with a gaping mouth leading an army of monsters to destroy Hawkins. That description fits the Thessal Hydra almost perfectly. The central gaping mouth is the creature's most distinctive feature in D&D lore. Nancy also mentioned that this creature wasn't alone, that it was accompanied by many other monsters, which matches how a Thessal Hydra would be deployed. As the centerpiece of an army, the massive weapon that breaks through defenses, while smaller creatures swarm around it. There's also Will's painting from Season 4 to consider. The artwork shows the party fighting a multi-headed dragon. While Will created this painting to express his feelings for Mike and his appreciation for the group, it might also be unintentionally prophetic. Will has been connected to the Upside Down and the Mind Flayer since Season 1. He senses when something is wrong when the Upside Down is active nearby. What if his subconscious picked up on Vecna's plans? What if that painting isn't just about friendship, but also a warning about what's coming? The really wild theory is that the Thessal Hydra might not be just one creature. Some fans speculate it could be a fusion of multiple upside-down monsters, sort of like how the Flesh Flayer was assembled from human bodies. What if Vecna takes Demogorgons, Demodogs, and other creatures and merges them together into one massive hybrid? The 8 heads could be 8 Demogorgon heads. The body could be built from vines and biomass from the upside down, creating a true chimera that represents everything horrible about the dimension made manifest. Another possibility is that the Thessalhydra is actually the Mind Flayer's true form. When we saw the Mind Flayer in Season 2, it was a shadow creature, essentially formless. When it created the Flesh Flayer in Season 3, it chose a spider-like body plan. But what if it can take other forms? What if the Thessalhydra is the shape it takes when fully manifested in our dimension? When it stops hiding behind avatars and puppets and shows its true nature? That would make the final battle even more significant. Not just defeating Vecna and his army, but facing the Mind Flayer in its ultimate form. From a visual and narrative standpoint, the Thessalhydra would be the perfect final boss for Stranger Things. It's been set up since Season 1, it fits the show's D&D theming, and it represents a threat so massive that it would require everyone working together to defeat it. The Demogorgon was fought by a small group in Season 1. The Mind Flayer required a larger coordinated effort in Seasons 2 and 3. Vecna took multiple teams operating in different locations to barely survive encountering in Season 4. The Thessalhydra would need to be something that requires literally everyone, every character, every resource, all working together for one final desperate battle. That's the kind of climax the series deserves. The scene described by Nancy, with dead soldiers and armies of monsters led by this massive creature with a gaping mouth, suggests that the US military will get involved in Season 5. We've seen hints of military presence throughout the series, especially with Colonel Sullivan in Season 4. Imagine the final battle. The Hawkins gang, with their knowledge and powers, coordinating with military forces who have firepower and numbers, all facing down the Thessalhydra and its army of upside-down creatures. It would be warfare on a scale the show has never attempted, bringing together all the personal character moments with genuinely epic battle sequences. There's also the thematic weight of the Thessalhydra representing completion. The series started with kids playing D&D and ended up in an actual war with monsters from another dimension. Having the final monster be something pulled directly from their earliest game together would bring everything full circle. It would validate their way of understanding the world through fantasy and imagination, showing that the stories we tell and the games we play prepare us in unexpected ways for real challenges. Now let's discuss some of the more speculative possibilities for new or returning creatures. One name that's come up repeatedly is Camazotz, which we mentioned earlier in relation to Demobats. In Dungeons & Dragons, Camazotz is described as a demon lord of bats, an evil entity associated with disease, plague, and the underworld. Its inclusion as an episode title for Season 5 suggests it's going to be significant, but how exactly remains unclear. One theory is that Camazotz is an evolved or mutated form of Demobat, possibly a queen or alpha that controls all the others. In nature, many bat species have complex social hierarchies with dominant individuals. If Demobats follow similar patterns, there could be a central intelligence coordinating their swarms, a massive mother creature that the others serve and protect. This Camazotz would be to Demobats what a Demogorgon is to Demodogs, the final evolutionary form that's far more powerful and dangerous than its lesser kin. Another possibility is that Camazotz is its own unique creature, unrelated to Demobats, but sharing the bat theme. It could be something Vecna summons or creates specifically for the final battle, a new weapon designed to counter the humans' defensive strategies. If it's inspired by the Demon Lord version from D&D, it might have abilities beyond physical attack. Disease and plague could mean it spreads infection, creates poisonous clouds, or corrupts whatever it touches. That would make it a different kind of threat than the straight predators we've seen before, something you can't just fight with guns and fire. There's also the A Wrinkle in Time connection. In that novel, Camazotz is a planet where everyone is mind-controlled by an evil entity called IT. The entire population moves in sync, thinking the same thoughts, living in artificial harmony that's actually oppression. Some fans theorize that Escape from Camazotz might refer to characters being trapped in a psychic prison, possibly inside Vecna's mind or within the hive mind itself. This would be psychological horror rather than monster action, dealing with the loss of self and the fight to maintain individual identity against a force trying to absorb you. What's interesting about the Camazotz theories is how they all involve themes of control and corruption. Whether it's a physical bat creature or a psychological trap, the concept seems to be about something that overwhelms through domination rather than simple violence. That fits with the Mind Flayer's overall strategy: possess, control, absorb. Vecna kills with curses and psychological torture. The Flayed lost their minds before their bodies were consumed. If Camazotz follows these patterns, it might be the ultimate expression of the Upside Down's desire to subsume all individual existence into its collective consciousness. We should also discuss the possibility of other D&D creatures making appearances. The Tarrasque has been mentioned as another potential monster for Season 5. In D&D, the Tarrasque is essentially a walking natural disaster, a gargantuan creature that destroys civilizations just by existing. It's nearly indestructible, can regenerate from almost any damage, and is typically considered the ultimate challenge in the game. If the Duffer Brothers wanted to introduce something that makes even the Thessal Hydra look small, the Tarrasque would be it. Then there's Tiamat, the five-headed dragon queen from D&D lore. We mentioned Will's painting of a multi-headed dragon earlier. While that's usually interpreted as foreshadowing the Thessal Hydra, it could just as easily be Tiamat. In D&D mythology, Tiamat is the mother of all evil dragons, a god-level entity with 5 heads of different colors, each head breathing a different type of destructive energy. She represents chaos, greed, and destruction. A Stranger Things version of Tiamat would be absolutely spectacular visually and terrifying in terms of power level. Some of the more out there theories suggest creatures that haven't been in any D&D manual but make thematic sense for the show. What about other variants of demo creatures? We've seen Demogorgons, Demodogs, and Demobats. Why not Demo Spiders, Democats, or even Demo Sharks? The Upside Down could have parallel evolution for all sorts of Earth creatures, creating twisted versions adapted for that hostile environment. A swarm of Demospiders covering the walls and ceiling, or Democats hunting in packs with the speed and agility of actual felines, but the predatory nature of upside-down creatures could provide some truly creative horror sequences. There's also the question of whether the Upside Down has non-predatory creatures. Everything we've seen has been designed to kill and consume, but surely there must be other forms of life in that dimension. Perhaps there are scavengers, decomposers, or even herbivorous creatures that feed on the strange flora. In Season 5, if characters spend more time in the Upside Down itself, we might see glimpses of this broader ecosystem. Not every encounter has to be a fight to the death. Sometimes the most unsettling moment is seeing something completely alien going about its business, ignoring you because you're not prey or threat, just irrelevant to its existence. We should also consider the possibility of hybrids or mutated forms of known creatures. Will Byers survived a week in the Upside Down and came back changed, but still human? What if there are others who spent even longer there and became something between human and monster? The Duffer Brothers could introduce tragic figures who were once people from Hawkins, but have been transformed by prolonged exposure to the dimension's influence. They might retain fragments of their humanity, creating moral dilemmas about whether they can be saved or must be fought as enemies. There's also the ongoing question about Kali, also known as 8, the girl with illusion powers from Season 2. Many fans have been hoping she'll return for the final season. While Kaylee herself isn't a monster, her powers could be used to create the appearance of monsters, either to frighten enemies or to disguise the true nature of what's attacking. Imagine if Vecna somehow gained access to illusion abilities, able to make his forces appear larger, more numerous, or more terrifying than they actually are. Psychological warfare through false monsters could be just as effective as actual creature attacks. Let's talk about the particles and spores of the Upside Down, because these microscopic elements might actually be more dangerous than any visible monster. Throughout the series, we've seen that the air in the Upside Down is filled with floating particles that look like ash or snow. These aren't just atmospheric effects, they're biological agents with the ability to infect and transform living beings. Will coughed up a slug in Season 1 after breathing Upside Down air. The spores can carry polywogs or other larvae. Even brief exposure seems to create lasting connections to the dimension. In Season 5, with the Upside Down spreading through Hawkins, these particles are going to be everywhere. Anyone breathing the air could be inhaling infection. The particles might cause mutations, possession, or slow transformation into flayed servants. This creates a threat that you can't see or fight conventionally. Quarantine protocols, air filtration, sealed environments, these become as important as weapons when the enemy is in the air itself. It's biological horror, the fear of invisible contamination, of your own body being turned against you from the inside. There's also the question of whether prolonged exposure to Upside Down particles causes more permanent changes. We've seen possession and temporary infection, but what about long-term effects? Could people slowly mutate into hybrid forms? Could entire populations be transformed over time into something that serves the Mind Flayer without even realizing they've been changed? This would be invasion through assimilation, far more insidious than open warfare. The visual representation of this threat would be fascinating in Season 5. Imagine Hawkins uncovered in that perpetual snowfall of particles, characters having to wear masks or respirators, decontamination procedures before entering safe zones. It would create this constant, low-level dread, the knowledge that every breath might be bringing you closer to transformation, and it would make the stakes deeply personal. This isn't just about stopping monster attacks. It's about preserving your own humanity in the face of an environment actively trying to rewrite your biology. We should also discuss the possibility of the Upside Down itself being a kind of monster. Not any individual creature within it, but the dimension as a whole acting as a single intelligent entity. The vines, particles, creatures, the Mind Flayer, Vecna, all could be organs or extensions of one massive organism that spans an entire dimension. If that's true, then fighting individual monsters is like trying to kill a body by attacking individual cells. You might win tactical victories, but the organism as a whole continues. This interpretation would explain a lot. Why does the Upside Down seem to have unified purpose despite being populated by different species? Because they're all part of one larger entity. Why do wounds to the vines cause systemic reactions across great distances? Because you're damaging the nervous system of a singular being. Why does closing gates cause creatures to die? Because you're cutting off parts of the organism from its central mass. If this theory is correct, the only way to truly defeat the Upside Down is to kill the dimension itself, which might require something as drastic as severing its connection to our reality permanently, or finding whatever serves as its core consciousness and destroying that. The metaphysical implications are staggering. You'd be fighting not just for Hawkins or even for Earth, but for the integrity of your own dimension against a predatory dimension that wants to absorb and subsume everything. It's cosmic horror in the tradition of Lovecraft, entities so vast and alien that human concepts of individual identity and mortality become meaningless. The Upside Down doesn't hate humanity. It simply views us as nutrients or building materials, no more worthy of consideration than we give to the bacteria we kill with antibiotics. Now let's consider the military response to all of this. We've seen hints throughout the series that government agencies are aware of the Upside Down, obviously, given Hawkins Lab's whole operation. By season 5, with a massive rift splitting Hawkins open and monsters openly attacking in daylight, there's no way to keep it secret anymore. The US military will have to get involved, and that brings its own complications and possibilities. Colonel Sullivan in season 4 represented the military's perspective. Eliminate all test subjects, shut down all research, contain the threat by any means necessary, even if it means sacrificing Hawkins entirely. In season 5, we might see a full military quarantine of the town, with soldiers establishing perimeters, evacuating civilians, and preparing to fight creatures that they don't understand and can barely hurt with conventional weapons. This could create an interesting dynamic where our heroes have to convince the military to follow their strategies rather than just carpet bombing everything. But what if the military's involvement makes things worse? What if heavy bombardment damages the dimensional barriers further, creating more gates rather than closing them? What if military casualties just provide more biomass for the Mind Flayer to create flesh flayers or other constructs? The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and the military's straightforward approach of overwhelming firepower might play directly into Vecna's hands. There's also the possibility of government experiments creating new threats. Hawkins' lab was just one facility. What if there are others? What if the military has been conducting its own research into the Upside Down, trying to weaponize it or create their own psychic soldiers? We could see corrupted experiments, failed containment of captured creatures, or even deliberate attempts to ally with Upside Down entities. The human capacity for making things worse in pursuit of power or security has always been a theme in Stranger Things, and Season 5 could explore that theme more fully. Let's think about how all of these monsters might appear together. Nancy's vision showed armies of creatures, not just one or two types, but many working in coordination. The final battle of Season 5 could feature Demogorgons as shock troops smashing through defenses, Demodogs in packs hunting stragglers, Demobats providing air support and reconnaissance, vines spreading through streets, creating obstacles and traps, the Flesh Flayer or something similar providing massive physical presence, and the Thessal Hydra or Tarask or Tiamat serving as the ultimate weapon, the thing that breaks everything else. Coordinating all of those elements would require serious intelligence, either from Vecna personally or from the Mind Flayer. We might see the monsters using actual military tactics, feints to draw defenders out of position, concentrated assaults on key locations, cutting off supply lines and communications. The Upside Down's forces aren't just a mindless horde. They're an organized army with strategic objectives. That makes them far more dangerous than individual powerful creatures would be. From a storytelling perspective, the monster army also allows for different characters to face different threats based on their skills and arcs. Steve might end up fighting Demodogs in close quarters, using his bat skills and protective instincts to save civilians. Nancy could be sniping Demobats or Demogorgons from elevated positions, using her marksmanship and tactical thinking. Dustin might jury-rig technology to disrupt the hive mind's communications, attacking the infrastructure rather than individual creatures. Lucas could demonstrate growth from Season 4's basketball conflicts by stepping up in physical confrontations. Erica's intelligence and small size might make her perfect for infiltration missions. Every character gets their moment to shine against threats suited to showcasing their development. And then there's Eleven. Throughout the series, Eleven has been the ultimate weapon against Upside Down threats, using her psychic powers to fight things that conventional weapons couldn't touch. But by Season 5, she's going to be exhausted, possibly wounded, definitely traumatized by 4 seasons of constant conflict. Her confrontation with Vecna in Season 4 took everything she had, and she still barely survived. For the final battle, Eleven might not be able to just blast everything with telekinesis. She'll need to be strategic, picking her targets, conserving her strength, possibly working in coordination with other psychic individuals if any have emerged or been discovered. There's also Max's situation to consider. Her consciousness is currently somewhere between life and death, possibly trapped inside Vecna's mind, as some theories suggest. If Max is indeed imprisoned within the hive mind, she might be experiencing the Upside Down's true nature in ways no one else can, seeing the connections between creatures, understanding how Vecna and the Mind Flayer relate. Information she gains during this time could be crucial to finding weaknesses or devising strategies. And if her consciousness is freed, whether through Vecna's death or Eleven's intervention, she might come back with abilities or knowledge that change the game entirely. Will Byers is another crucial element. His connection to the Upside Down, to Vecna, to the Mind Flayer, makes him potentially the most important person in the final battle. He can sense when creatures are near, possibly predict their movements. He might be able to communicate with or influence the hive mind, either because of his past possession or because Vecna maintains that link intentionally. The question is whether Will's connection is a weakness to be exploited or a weapon to be wielded. Can he turn his sensitivity to the Upside Down into a way of fighting back against it? Or will Vecna use that connection to possess Will one final time, forcing the others to fight their friend? The emotional weight of fighting monsters you've faced before adds another layer. These aren't abstract threats. They're creatures that have personally hurt people the characters love. Demobats killed Eddie. Demodogs killed Bob. The Mind Flayer possessed Will and Billy. Vecna murdered multiple teenagers and nearly killed Max. Every monster in the final battle represents past trauma, past losses, past terror. The characters aren't just fighting for Hawkins' future. They're fighting to finally end nightmares that have haunted them for years. There's something deeply satisfying about the idea of facing all the monsters together in one final confrontation. It's the culmination of everything the series has built, every threat overcome, every sacrifice made. The Demogorgon that started it all appearing alongside the most recent threats. The monsters from different seasons united under one banner for one apocalyptic battle. It's the visual and thematic representation of the characters' entire journey, with every enemy they've ever faced returning for one last attempt to destroy them. From a practical effects standpoint, Season 5 is going to be the most expensive and technically complex season of the show. The Duffer Brothers have consistently pushed the boundaries of what television can do with creature effects and action sequences. Season 1's Demogorgon was impressive for a television show. Season 2's Demodog swarms and tunnel sequences raised the bar. Season 3's Flesh Flayer broke television creature effects wide open. Season 4's Vecna and the scale of the Upside Down sequences showed that Stranger Things could compete with major films in terms of visual spectacle. Season 5 needs to top all of that, which means we're likely looking at movie-quality creature work, massive battle sequences, and effects shots that would have been unthinkable for television just a few years ago. The creature designers have done incredible work throughout the series, creating monsters that are genuinely original despite drawing on familiar horror tropes. The Demogorgon's petal mouth, the Mind Flayer's shadow form, the Flesh Flayer's biomechanical appearance, Vecna's corpse-like physicality, all of these designs are iconic and immediately recognizable. For Season 5, whatever new monsters appear need to maintain that standard of originality while fitting into the established aesthetic of the Upside Down. There's also sound design to consider. Every Stranger Things monster has a distinctive audio signature. The Demogorgon's roar, the Demodog's chittering, the Demobat's screeching, Vecna's breathing, and the sound of breaking bones during his curses. Sound tells us what's nearby, even when we can't see it, building tension and horror. In the final season, imagine the cacophony of all these sounds together, Roars, screeches, chittering, the wet slithering of vines, the rumble of massive creatures moving, all creating this symphony of horror that's constantly present throughout the battles. Let's also talk about environments and how they affect monster appearances. The Upside Down is spreading through Hawkins, which means we're going to see familiar locations transformed into hostile territory. The school, the mall, the Wheeler house, the buyer's home, all could become hunting grounds for various creatures. Each location would favor different monsters. Tight corridors would be Demodog territory. Large open spaces could be where Demogorgons dominate. Areas with high ceilings or open sky become Demobat zones. Underground or heavily vine-covered regions might be where the Flesh Flayer or other biomass creatures operate best. This variety of environments means we'll see different monsters in different settings, keeping the action fresh and requiring the characters to adapt their tactics constantly. There's also weather to consider. The Upside Down has that perpetual storm quality, red lightning and dark skies. As it spreads through Hawkins, the local weather would change to match. Imagine fighting monsters during lightning storms, visibility reduced, electrical equipment failing, the environment itself becoming an enemy. Or what if the dimensional merger causes more extreme phenomena? Gravitational anomalies, where debris and even creatures float? Temperature fluctuations that freeze or burn? Temporal distortions, where time moves differently in certain areas? The breakdown of reality itself could create environmental hazards as dangerous as any monster. Now let's consider the endgame. How do you actually defeat an army of monsters backed by two dimension-spanning intelligences? Brute force won't work. There are simply too many creatures, and they can apparently be replenished as long as the connection to the Upside Down remains open. The heroes need a strategic solution that addresses the root cause rather than just fighting symptoms. One possibility is severing the connection between Vecna and the Mind Flayer. If fan theories are correct, and the Mind Flayer is manipulating Vecna, then making Vecna aware of this manipulation could turn him against his master. It would be an enemy of my enemy situation, where the characters ally temporarily with Vecna to defeat the Mind Flayer, or at least exploit the conflict between them to create an opening for victory. This would require psychological warfare, convincing Vecna that he's not as in control as he thinks, which is exactly the kind of challenge that characters like Nancy and Robin excel at. Another option is attacking the hive mind infrastructure directly. The vines are essentially the nervous system of the Upside Down. What if there's a central nexus, a heart or brain of the network that could be destroyed? Finding and reaching that location would require going deep into the Upside Down, possibly all the way to Dimension X itself. The primordial chaos before Vecna shaped parts of it. A small team on a suicide mission into the most hostile environment imaginable, fighting through armies of monsters to reach and destroy the source of it all. It's classic hero's journey stuff, and it would give the characters a clear objective rather than just fight until everyone is dead. There's also the question of sacrifice. Stranger Things has always been about love and friendship triumphing over evil, but it's also been willing to show that triumph comes at a cost. In the final battle against this monster army, not everyone is making it out. The question is who and how their sacrifice will matter. If Eleven gives her life to close the gates permanently, her death needs to be meaningful, needs to actually accomplish something that couldn't be done any other way. Same for any other character deaths. The narrative has to earn those sacrifices by making them necessary and impactful, not just shock value. I think one of the most interesting aspects of Season 5's monster content will be seeing how the regular people of Hawkins react and adapt. For 4 seasons, only a small group has known the truth about what's really happening. But with the Upside Down spreading openly, with monsters in the streets, everyone will know. How do normal people cope with that knowledge? Do they flee, fight, or freeze? We might see ordinary Hawkins residents becoming monster hunters out of necessity, using improvised weapons and local knowledge to survive. That would add a layer of desperate resistance to the story, showing that heroism isn't just about having powers or plot armor, but about ordinary people making extraordinary choices in impossible situations. The psychological horror of living in a town overrun by monsters can't be overstated. For the characters who've been fighting this fight for years, it's validation. They've been right all along about the threats lurking beneath the surface, but it's also exhausting, traumatizing, the confirmation that the nightmares are real and have won, at least temporarily. For new characters or those who've been kept in the dark, it's the complete collapse of their understanding of reality. Everything they thought was safe is now dangerous. The rules of the world have changed, and adaptation is the only path to survival. As we approach the end of this deep dive into every monster that could return in Season 5, I'm struck by how comprehensive the Duffer Brothers monster catalog has become. They've created an entire ecosystem of horror, with creatures filling different ecological niches, serving different purposes, and providing different kinds of scares. The Demogorgon is the apex predator, the classic monster movie threat. Demodogs are the swarm, overwhelming through numbers. Demobats are aerial terror and surveillance. The Flesh Flayer is body horror made manifest. Vecna is psychological torture and ritualistic killing. The Mind Flayer is cosmic horror, the unknowable other. The vines and particles are environmental hazard and biological infection. Together, they create a multi-layered threat that attacks on physical, psychological, and metaphysical levels simultaneously. What makes Stranger Things monsters so effective is that they're not just obstacles to be overcome. They're expressions of deeper themes and fears. The Demogorgon represents the unknown predator, the thing in the dark that wants to hurt you. The Mind Flayer is loss of self, the fear of possession and control. Vecna is guilt and trauma weaponized, showing how our own minds can be our worst enemies. The spreading Upside Down is corruption and decay, the gradual loss of everything familiar and safe. Each monster means something beyond just being scary, which is why they resonate with audiences on a deeper level than many horror creatures. For Season 5 to succeed, it needs to honor all of this while also bringing it to a satisfying conclusion. Every monster that returns should serve a purpose in the narrative, not just be fan service. The new monsters, whatever they are, need to fit thematically, while also escalating the threat to match the final season's stakes. And the resolution, whether it's defeating the monsters, sealing them away, or finding some other solution, needs to feel earned through the character's growth, choices, and sacrifices over the entire series. I'm genuinely excited to see how the Duffer Brothers handle this challenge. They've proven over 4 seasons that they understand both horror and heart, that they can deliver terrifying monsters while never losing sight of the human characters at the center of the story. The final battle against the monster army will be spectacular, I'm sure, with some of the best creature effects and action sequences ever put on television. But what will make it truly memorable is how it serves the characters' arcs and brings their journeys to meaningful conclusions. Imagine the moment when despite drawing on familiar horror tropes, the Demogorgon's petal mouth, the Mind Flayer's shadow form, the Flesh Flayer's biomechanical appearance, Vecna's corpse-like physicality, all of these designs are iconic and immediately recognizable. For Season 5, whatever new monsters appear need to maintain that standard of originality while fitting into the established aesthetic of the Upside Down. There's also sound design to consider. Every Stranger Things monster has a distinctive audio signature. The Demogorgon's roar, the Demodog's chittering, the Demobat's screeching, Vecna's breathing, and the sound of breaking bones during his curses. Sound tells us what's nearby, even when we can't see it, building tension and horror. In the final season, imagine the cacophony of all these sounds together: roars, screeches, chittering, the wet slithering of vines, the rumble of massive creatures moving, all creating this symphony of horror that's constantly present throughout the battles. Let's also talk about environments and how they affect monster appearances. The Upside Down is spreading through Hawkins, which means we're going to see familiar locations transformed into hostile territory. The school, the mall, the Wheeler house, the buyer's home, all could become hunting grounds for various creatures. Each location would favor different monsters. Tight corridors would be Demodog territory. Large open spaces could be where Demogorgons dominate. Areas with high ceilings or open sky become Demobat zones. Underground or heavily vine-covered regions might be where the Flesh Flayer or other biomass creatures operate best. This variety of environments means we'll see different monsters in different settings, keeping the action fresh and requiring the characters to adapt their tactics constantly. There's also weather to consider. The Upside Down has that perpetual storm quality, red lightning and dark skies. As it spreads through Hawkins, the local weather would change to match. Imagine fighting monsters during lightning storms, visibility reduced, electrical equipment failing, the environment itself becoming an enemy. Or what if the dimensional merger causes more extreme phenomena? Gravitational anomalies, where debris and even creatures float? Temperature fluctuations that freeze or burn? Temporal distortions, where time moves differently in certain areas? The breakdown of reality itself could create environmental hazards as dangerous as any monster. Now let's consider the endgame. How do you actually defeat an army of monsters backed by 2 dimension-spanning intelligences? Brute force won't work. There are simply too many creatures, and they can apparently be replenished as long as the connection to the Upside Down remains open. The heroes need a strategic solution that addresses the root cause rather than just fighting symptoms. One possibility is severing the connection between Vecna and the Mind Flayer. If fan theories are correct, and the Mind Flayer is manipulating Vecna, then making Vecna aware of this manipulation could turn him against his master. It would be a enemy of my enemy situation where the characters ally temporarily with Vecna to defeat the Mind Flayer, or at least exploit the conflict between them to create an opening for victory. This would require psychological warfare, convincing Vecna that he's not as in control as he thinks, which is exactly the kind of challenge that characters like Nancy and Robin excel at. Another option is attacking the hive mind infrastructure directly. The vines are essentially the nervous system of the Upside Down. What if there's a central nexus, a heart or brain of the network that could be destroyed? Finding and reaching that location would require going deep into the Upside Down, possibly all the way to Dimension X itself. The primordial chaos before Vecna shaped parts of it. A small team on a suicide mission into the most hostile environment imaginable, fighting through armies of monsters to reach and destroy the source of it all. It's classic hero's journey stuff, and it would give the characters a clear objective rather than just fight until everyone is dead. There's also the question of sacrifice. Stranger Things has always been about love and friendship triumphing over evil, but it's also been willing to show that triumph comes at a cost. In the final battle against this monster army, not everyone is making it out. The question is who and how their sacrifice will matter. If Eleven gives her life to close the gates permanently, her death needs to be meaningful, needs to actually accomplish something that couldn't be done any other way. Same for any other character deaths. The narrative has to earn those sacrifices by making them necessary and impactful, not just shock value. I think one of the most interesting aspects of Season 5's monster content will be seeing how the regular people of Hawkins react and adapt. For 4 seasons, only a small group has known the truth about what's really happening. But with the Upside Down spreading openly, with monsters in the streets, everyone will know. How do normal people cope with that knowledge? Do they flee, fight, or freeze? We might see ordinary Hawkins residents becoming monster hunters out of necessity, using improvised weapons and local knowledge to survive. That would add a layer of desperate resistance to the story, showing that heroism isn't just about having powers or plot armor, but about ordinary people making extraordinary choices in impossible situations. The psychological horror of living in a town overrun by monsters can't be overstated. For the characters who've been fighting this fight for years, it's validation. They've been right all along about the threats lurking beneath the surface, but it's also exhausting, traumatizing, the confirmation that the nightmares are real and have won, at least temporarily. For new characters or those who've been kept in the dark, it's the complete collapse of their understanding of reality. Everything they thought was safe is now dangerous. The rules of the world have changed, and adaptation is the only path to survival. As we approach the end of this deep dive into every monster that could return in Season 5, I'm struck by how comprehensive the Duffer Brothers monster catalog has become. They've created an entire ecosystem of horror, with creatures filling different ecological niches, serving different purposes, and providing different kinds of scares. The Demogorgon is the apex predator, the classic monster movie threat. Demodogs are the swarm, overwhelming through numbers. Demobats are aerial terror and surveillance. The Flesh Flayer is body horror made manifest. Vecna is psychological torture and ritualistic killing. The Mind Flayer is cosmic horror, the unknowable other. The vines and particles are environmental hazard and biological infection. Together, they create a multi-layered threat that attacks on physical, psychological, and metaphysical levels simultaneously. What makes Stranger Things monsters so effective is that they're not just obstacles to be overcome. They're expressions of deeper themes and fears. The Demogorgon represents the unknown predator, the thing in the dark that wants to hurt you. The Mind Flayer is loss of self, the fear of possession and control. Vecna is guilt and trauma weaponized, showing how our own minds can be our worst enemies. The spreading upside down is corruption and decay, the gradual loss of everything familiar and safe. Each monster means something beyond just being scary, which is why they resonate with audiences on a deeper level than many horror creatures. For Season 5 to succeed, it needs to honor all of this while also bringing it to a satisfying conclusion. Every monster that returns should serve a purpose in the narrative, not just be fan service. The new monsters, whatever they are, need to fit thematically, while also escalating the threat to match the final season's stakes. And the resolution, whether it's defeating the monsters, sealing them away, or finding some other solution, needs to feel earned through the characters' growth, choices, and sacrifices over the entire series. I'm genuinely excited to see how the Duffer Brothers handle this challenge. They've proven over 4 seasons that they understand both horror and heart, that they can deliver terrifying monsters while never losing sight of the human characters at the center of the story. The final battle against the monster army will be spectacular, I'm sure, with some of the best creature effects and action sequences ever put on television. But what will make it truly memorable is how it serves the characters' arcs and brings their journeys to meaningful conclusions. Imagine the moment when the characters face the full monster army for the first time. The sky is dark with demobats. The ground is shaking from Demogorgon footsteps. Demodogs are howling in the distance. The Thessal Hydra, or whatever ultimate creature appears, rises above the buildings, and Vecna watches from his lair as the Mind Flayer's presence looms over everything. It's the nightmare made real, every threat they've ever faced, amplified and united. But instead of despairing, the characters stand together, armed with 4 seasons of experience, knowledge, friendship, and determination. They've been through hell multiple times and come back. They've lost people they love, but continue fighting in their memory. They're terrified, but they're ready, because that's what Stranger Things has always been about. Ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when faced with monsters both literal and metaphorical. Before we finish, I want to thank you for spending this time with me, exploring the creatures of the Upside Down. I know this has been a long journey through some genuinely disturbing content, but that's part of what makes Stranger Things so compelling. It doesn't shy away from horror, but it also never lets the horror overwhelm the hope and humanity at the story's core. Whatever monsters appear in Season 5, whatever horrors the Duffer Brothers unleash, I trust that they'll also give us moments of bravery, friendship, love, and ultimately triumph that make the scary parts worth enduring. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more content like this, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps the algorithm know that people appreciate long-form, detailed analysis of the shows we love. I'll definitely be creating more Stranger Things content as we get closer to Season 5's release, including deep dives on specific characters, theories about the ending, and analysis of trailers and promotional materials as they drop. There's also loads more to explore about the Upside Down's biology, the history of Hawkins' lab, the real-world science and horror that inspired the series, and how Stranger Things fits into the larger tradition of 80s nostalgia and genre storytelling. Thank you again for listening, my dear adventurers. May your dreams tonight be filled with wonder rather than terror, though if a Demogorgon happens to wander through your subconscious, remember that you're braver than you know and stronger than any monster. Sleep well, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay safe and sweet dreams.